What if the quiet man with glasses was the deadliest of them all? I'm your guide from forgotten history tales, and tonight I step into the hidden world of Heinrich Himmler, where ordinary masks conceal unimaginable horrors. Come closer. I take you into a room most of us would never why to enter. The air is stale, thick with the faint odor of dust and old paper. A single lamp burns on the desk, throwing sharp shadows across the walls. And there, staring back at me from a black and white photograph, is a man who does not look like a monster at all. His spectacles are round and plain. His lips seem almost timid, pressed together in an expression more suited to a quiet librarian than the overseer of mass death. His name is Heinrich Himmler. At first glance, he is unremarkable, narrow-shouldered, his posture slightly stooped, his eyes hidden behind the reflection of his glasses. Nothing about this man suggests power, cruelty, or the ability to command millions. And yet, as I lean closer into this image, I feel the weight of what he became. This is the mask that history has handed us, the bureaucrat of genocide. But behind those lenses, behind the neat hair parted to one side, was a world far stranger, darker, and more obsessive than the public ever realized. The year is 1900. I invite you into a small house in Munich, where a child is born into a strict, respectable Catholic family. His father, a headmaster, embodies authority and discipline. His mother, warm but conservative, tends to her children with the careful hand expected of her class. The young Heinrich is not a boy of play or laughter. He is shy, withdrawn, and often unwell. His school reports describe him as diligent but physically weak. Already, the seeds of insecurity are sown. I imagine him at a wooden desk, poring over his Latin, his pen scratching neatly across the page. He dreams not of games in the sun, but of knights, medieval castles, and ancient rituals. He grows up in a world where honor, race, and purity are whispered ideals. And in his heart, he begins to believe that he is destined for something greater, something almost sacred. By the 1920s, Germany is in turmoil. Inflation eats away at savings. The streets rumble with political violence, and the proud empire has crumbled into chaos. Himmler, now a young man, drifts between studies in agriculture and his fascination with right-wing movements. He is neither soldierly nor charismatic. He has no war hero's story to tell. Instead, he clings to ideology like a lifeline. He joins the early Nazi Party, not as a fighter, but as an organizer. Paper, lists, and loyalty are his weapons. Here is the irony. While others raise fists and march with thunderous chants, Himmler perfects the art of bureaucracy. He is methodical, tireless, and ruthlessly precise. He builds structures where others create slogans. In the shadows, away from Hitler's roaring speeches, Himmler becomes the quiet architect. But behind this bureaucratic mask lies an interior world almost medieval in its obsessions. I want you to picture him at night, his desk cluttered with books not just on farming and science, but on runes, folklore, and the occult. He scribbles notes on racial theories, studies genealogies as though they hold sacred truth, and dreams of reviving an ancient Teutonic order of knights. This is the first crack in the image of the cold administrator. Himmler is not simply a man of files and orders. He is a mystic, a dreamer, a man enthralled by a fantasy of racial purity and magical destiny. To him, the Nazi movement is not politics. It is a crusade. And he, awkward, bespectacled Heinrich, is the high priest. I take you forward to the early 1930s. The SS, once a minor bodyguard unit for Hitler, is placed under Himmler's control. At first, it is small, almost irrelevant compared to the storming brown-shirted SA. But Himmler sees in it the chance to forge his knightly order. He imposes strict discipline, black uniforms, and loyalty oaths that sound more like vows of a monastic brotherhood. He insists that his men trace their family trees back centuries, purging the ranks of those who cannot prove racial purity. It is chilling to realize how effective he is. From obscurity, Himmler transforms the SS into an elite corps, fanatically devoted to Hitler, yet bound by Himmler's vision of blood and soil. He is not charismatic, not beloved, but he is relentless. Where others see limitations, he sees blueprints. And still, in private, he surrounds himself with relics and rituals. He dreams of Wewelsburg Castle as the SS's spiritual center, where ceremonies would echo with torchlight and medieval symbolism. The historian in me shudders. This is no mere administrative order. It is the marriage of myth and murder. What strikes me most is the contradiction. To the outside world, Himmler embodies order, a man of neat files, timetables, and reports. But in his inner sanctum, he is consumed by visions of runes, ancestral spirits, and racial destiny. This duality makes him dangerous. He is not the loud demagogue nor the brutal thug. He is the clerk who believes his paperwork summons a new world. He is the believer who wraps genocide in ritual. As I reflect on his rise, I cannot help but feel the chilling normality of his surface life. A man who kept meticulous diaries, a man who worried over his health, adored gardening, and sent sentimental letters home. It is precisely this blend of the ordinary and the monstrous that unsettles me most. Because if Heinrich Himmler could cloak horror behind such a mask, what does that say about the masks we encounter today? And so we end this first step into his secret life, where the boy who dreamed of knights and purity grows into the architect of the SS. Yet the story is only beginning. For soon, Himmler's fantasies will collide with Hitler's ambitions, and the machinery of terror will grind into motion. But before we march into the camps, the executions, and the shadows of genocide, we must descend deeper into Himmler's mind. We must stand with him in the quiet hours when he thought of destiny, of purity, of death, and believed himself a savior. The man behind the glasses is not yet fully revealed. His secret life has only begun to whisper its truths. I take you deeper now, straight from where we left him. Himmler, the frail boy who dreamed of knights, now standing at the helm of something far more formidable. The SS, once a handful of guards in black uniforms, begins to swell under his direction. It is still the early 1930s, but already his vision is taking shape. Not just an armed unit, but a brotherhood forged in blood, loyalty, and myth. I see him moving quietly through the corridors of power, never loud, never brash, while others in the Nazi hierarchy jostle for Hitler's attention with boasts and flamboyant gestures. Himmler plays the long game. He works in silence with lists, files, and patient organization. He builds slowly, brick upon brick, transforming the SS from a ceremonial guard into an elite corps that answers only to him, and through him, to Hitler. Yet I feel it is not enough for Himmler to command men. He must command their very souls. He begins demanding genealogical proof of ancestry, binding each man's worth to the purity of his bloodline. In Himmler's eyes, this is not bureaucracy. It is ritual. He speaks of the SS as if it were a priesthood, a holy order tasked with cleansing and protecting the German race. To his recruits, he offers both belonging and transcendence. They are not merely soldiers, they are knights of a new world. And then comes his true stroke of brilliance, or madness, depending on how you see it. He chooses Wewelsburg Castle, a looming fortress in Westphalia, to serve as the SS's spiritual center. I picture him standing in its cold stone halls, eyes gleaming as he imagines the future. He sees a Grail hall, a black sun engraved into the floor, rituals of fire and loyalty binding his men to something older than the Reich itself. To the outsider, it looks like fantasy. To Himmler, it is destiny. This duality continues to gnaw at me. By day, he is the efficient administrator, expanding the SS with ruthless precision. By night, he loses himself in visions of runes and sagas, convinced that he is reviving an ancient Aryan order. These two selves, clerk and mystic, are not separate but fused. It is this fusion that makes the SS terrifying. For when ideology meets organization, fantasy becomes structure, and structure becomes power. Meanwhile, the political landscape of Germany shifts. Hitler maneuvers against his rivals, consolidating his dictatorship. In the summer of 1934, the Night of the Long Knives strikes like a thunderclap. The SA, that rowdy stormtrooper force of millions, is cut down in a single bloody purge. It is Himmler's SS, silent and efficient, that plays the executioner. The message is clear. Loyalty to Hitler is everything. But beneath that message lies a deeper truth. The SS has supplanted the SA. Himmler's order has emerged from the shadows into the very heart of Nazi power. I imagine him on that night, not wielding a pistol himself, but standing behind it all with quiet satisfaction. His men obey without hesitation. They eliminate rivals, cleanse enemies, and prove that the SS is the sharpest blade in Hitler's arsenal. For Himmler, it is vindication. The shy boy, the awkward dreamer, has forged an instrument of fear that now reshapes Germany itself. And yet, even at this height of triumph, his mind drifts back to his fantasies. He writes letters, carefully composed, about duty and destiny. He worries over diet, health, and purity of body. He speaks to his men of honor, of being fathers to a racially perfect future, of being bound by blood. It is not enough to kill. They must believe. They must see themselves as chosen. What chills me most is the ordinariness with which he cloaks it all. His speeches to the SS are delivered in the flat tone of a schoolmaster, almost boring in their precision. But underneath, he is weaving a spell, transforming bureaucratic orders into sacred commandments, and his men follow because they see in him something not found in the chaos of others: certainty. By the mid-1930s, the SS is no longer just an order of bodyguards. It controls the police, the concentration camps, the machinery of surveillance. It has become a state within a state. And Himmler, without ever raising his voice, has placed himself at its head. His dream is growing, but so too is the shadow it casts. I stand in that moment and sense the tension. Behind the facade of discipline lies the abyss of what is to come. The files, the uniforms, the genealogies, they are not ends in themselves. They are preparation. The SS is becoming the tool through which Himmler will not only enforce Hitler's will, but also project his own vision of a purified world. And so the stage is set. The boy who read medieval romances has built his own order of knights. The quiet clerk has forged an empire of fear. The mystic has given ritual shape to bureaucracy. And as Europe drifts toward war, the full weight of this creation will descend upon millions. But what happens when a man who believes himself a priest of destiny is given command over life and death? What nightmares are unleashed when bureaucracy and belief merge into one? The answer lies just ahead, in the camps that begin to rise, in the files that turn names into numbers, and in the silence of the forests that will soon echo with gunfire. The shadow of Himmler is lengthening, and it is about to fall over all of Europe. The masks are slipping. What lurks beneath will change the world forever. Do you want me to carry the next section directly into Himmler's control of the police state and the early concentration camp system, showing how his bureaucratic vision begins to bleed into mass terror? The shadow spreads. I take you now into the mid-1930s, where Germany is being remade brick by brick, decree by decree. The Reich no longer simply marches, it watches. And at the center of this new watchful state is Heinrich Himmler. By now, his SS has become more than a corps of loyal men in black uniforms. It is seeping into every artery of German life, silently but relentlessly, until its grip becomes almost invisible, almost natural. I see him in his office, spectacles glinting in the light as he signs document after document. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady, precise strokes of the pen. Yet with each signature, the walls of freedom close tighter. For in 1936, Himmler achieves a victory that even he, the cautious builder, must have savored. He is placed in control of all German police forces. The Gestapo, the criminal police, the uniformed police, they all now answer to him. The quiet bureaucrat has become the nation's chief of terror. And yet, I feel no sense of triumph in his demeanor. He does not boast. He does not crow. He sets to work. His obsession is structure. He merges the police into the SS, binding them together so tightly that they cannot be separated. Files and reports stream into his desk. He reads them with the diligence of a schoolmaster marking essays. Each arrest, each interrogation, each disappearance becomes a neat entry in the machinery he has built. It is here that the true horror begins to take shape. The concentration camps, which had been scattered, improvised, chaotic in the early years, are now centralized under his control. Dachau becomes the model. Behind the gates, the barbed wire hums with tension, the air heavy with smoke from kitchens, forges, and punishment. Guards march with the discipline of monks on parade. To Himmler, these camps are not simply prisons. They are laboratories, testing grounds for the new order. I step closer, and I can almost hear the echo of his thoughts. To him, the camps are tools of purification. Criminals, political opponents, so-called asocials, anyone deemed unworthy, can be broken down, reshaped, or erased. It is a bureaucratic alchemy. Transform disorder into obedience, impurity into silence. Every detail matters to him. The uniforms of the guards, the roll calls, the punishments, all calibrated to instill fear, loyalty, and order. And in this lies the paradox that chills me. Himmler rarely lifts a weapon himself. He does not storm into cells or bark commands at prisoners. He delegates, he observes, he files reports. Yet the cruelty of the system flows directly from his pen. It is the cold cruelty of administration, where murder is masked as procedure and suffering is transformed into numbers on a page. Still, he remains in his own mind a man of ideals. He speaks endlessly of discipline, of the need for purity. He orders his SS men to abstain from drink and excess, to be upright fathers and husbands. He lectures them on loyalty as if they were students in a classroom. He cloaks the apparatus of terror in the language of virtue. And the men obey because the promise is intoxicating. To be part of something greater, to be chosen. Outside the camps, Germany shifts under this new reign. Fear seeps into every household. The Gestapo's knock on the door becomes a rumor, a whisper, a nightmare. that haunts the evenings. Neighbors wonder who will vanish next. Files thicken with denunciations. Loyalty is tested not just in grand gestures, but in everyday silence. And at the top of this pyramid of fear sits Himmler, inscrutable, methodical, unflinching. Yet what unsettles me most is how he compartmentalizes it all. In the evenings, he returns to his private world. He writes to his wife, Margaret, letters filled with domestic chatter. He tends to his beloved garden, fusses over herbs, worries about his digestion. The same man who oversees camps where men and women are reduced to skeletons also delights in breeding chickens and studying herbal remedies. This dissonance is not a flaw. It is the very armor that protects him. He convinces himself that he is not a butcher, but a healer of the nation, cleansing it of disease. By 1937, the SS has become the backbone of the Nazi state. The camps are expanding. The police serve Himmler's vision without question. And still, he dreams of the future, of breeding a new race, of purifying the bloodline, of stretching the SS order across Europe like a black shadow. It is a fantasy so vast that it almost drowns out reality. But reality is catching up. For beyond Germany's borders, the storm clouds of war are gathering. Hitler's ambitions grow larger, more reckless, and Himmler prepares the machinery that will turn ambition into action. The camps, the police, the SS, all are in place, ready to scale their terror to unimaginable proportions. I pause here and feel the weight of inevitability. The structures Himmler built in the mid-1930s were not static. They were foundations. And once war begins, once conquest feeds his vision of racial cleansing, these foundations will bear a monstrous fruit. The files are ready. The guards are trained. The orders can be written in an instant. Himmler, the boy who dreamed of knights, has forged his order. Now he waits for the battlefield where his vision of destiny can finally unfurl without restraint. And when that moment comes, the camps will no longer be places of repression alone. They will become engines of death. The world does not yet know it, but the path has been laid. The war begins like a storm, sudden yet inevitable. I take you into September 1939, the invasion of Poland, where the first cracks of thunder roll across Europe. For most, it is the opening of a global conflict. For Heinrich Himmler, it is something else, an opportunity. The careful structures he has built, the SS, the police, the camps, are no longer confined within Germany's borders. Now, with the tanks rolling east, his order of black-clad knights will stride into new lands, carrying with them both sword and ledger. I see him at his desk again, spectacles flashing as he reads reports from the front. The Wehrmacht smashes cities, but the SS follows in its shadow. In Poland, Himmler's men establish new camps almost immediately: Stutthof, Auschwitz, Majdanek. At first, they are extensions of the model at Dachau: prisons for political enemies, forced labor camps. But there is something darker lurking beneath these foundations. I can feel it, as though Himmler himself is breathing it into existence. These are not simply places to hold people. They are laboratories of conquest where whole populations will be broken, reordered, or destroyed. In the forests of Poland, I hear the first whispers of what is to come. Einsatzgruppen, special SS killing squads, move in behind the soldiers. They round up Jews, intellectuals, priests, and anyone who might resist German control. At first, the killings are selective, but soon they expand, engulfing villages, leaving shallow graves hidden in the trees. Himmler insists he rarely watches such violence himself. He finds the blood too unsettling. Yet he orders it, systematizes it, encourages it with chilling precision. Murder becomes procedure, written down in memoranda, tallied in reports. I imagine him visiting the front, as he sometimes did, standing at the edge of a pit while shots echo through the air. Witnesses later said he turned pale, nearly fainted, but forced himself to watch. And when it was over, when bodies lay in tangled heaps, he scolded his men, not for killing, but for becoming too emotional, too untidy. He told them they must learn to harden themselves, to see this work as duty. In those words, the abyss deepens. Back in Germany, his vision expands further. The SS is no longer merely a police force or a camp system. It becomes a colonizing machine. Himmler dreams of remaking Eastern Europe into a Germanic frontier. Millions of Poles, Slavs, and Jews are to be removed, resettled, or annihilated. German peasants, hand-picked for their racial purity, will be planted in their place like crops. He calls it General Plan Ost. On paper, it looks like a plan for agriculture and settlement. In reality, it is a blueprint for ethnic cleansing on an unimaginable scale. And still, he cloaks it in the language of duty, discipline, and virtue. To the SS men, he speaks not of murder, but of responsibility. He tells them they must become men of iron, capable of doing what others cannot, for the sake of the future. He frames it as a sacrifice, to bear the burden of cruelty so that their children may live in a purified world. It is a twisted sermon, and it works. His men obey. They follow him not just as a commander, but as a priest of destiny. By 1940, as France falls and Europe bends under Hitler's conquest, Himmler is already preparing for what lies ahead. The ghettos in Poland grow crowded, barbed wire closing around hundreds of thousands of Jews. Food is rationed to starvation levels. Disease spreads. To Himmler, these ghettos are holding pens, temporary measures, until a solution is found. And when war against the Soviet Union erupts in 1941, that solution begins to take form with horrifying clarity. I hear the thunder of artillery on the Eastern Front, the endless columns of soldiers marching toward the horizon. Behind them, Himmler's SS once again follows. But now the scale of killing explodes. Entire Jewish communities are marched into forests and shot, their lives erased in hours. Reports flow back to Himmler, numbers, locations, efficiency, and he responds not with horror, but with corrections, improvements, refinements. The killings must be orderly. The paperwork must be precise. Bureaucracy tightens its grip around death itself. Yet Himmler knows that bullets alone cannot sustain this vision. The toll on his men is too great, the waste too visible. And so he seeks another way, a method that is less messy, more industrial. It is here that Auschwitz transforms, that Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec emerge from the soil. Gas chambers, disguised as showers, become the new instruments of his dream. The camps that were once prisons and labor sites evolve into factories of death. What strikes me most is how Himmler frames even this in his peculiar mixture of coldness and mysticism. In speeches to his SS men, he insists they are doing something heroic, erasing a poison from Europe, shouldering a task too terrible for ordinary men. He tells them they must remain decent even as they commit acts of mass murder. Decency, in his definition, means not allowing pity to interfere with duty. It is a perversion of morality so grotesque that it chills me even now. And still, when the day's work is done, he retreats into his private life. He writes tender letters to his mistress. He frets about herbal remedies and the health of his chickens. He dreams of post-war estates where SS families will raise racially pure children among rolling fields. The dissonance is unbearable, and yet it is real. Himmler is both the architect of mass murder and the fussy gardener who worries over soil and sunlight. The war gives him everything he needs: land to conquer, populations to destroy, men to command, and myths to fulfill. But with every expansion, the abyss widens. Millions are caught in the machinery he has built, their lives reduced to files and figures, their deaths disguised as duty. I feel the weight of the silence around him, the way he avoids speaking plainly of what he has unleashed. He cloaks it in euphemism: resettlement, special treatment, final solution. Words become veils, hiding the screams that echo through forests and gas chambers. And behind those veils sits Himmler, calm, precise, convinced of his righteousness. The storm he has harnessed is no longer contained. It rages across Europe, sweeping away millions. And yet, even as the war turns, as defeat looms on the horizon, Himmler clings to his dream. He believes still that his order, his knights, his vision of purity will endure. But war has a way of exposing the truth behind masks. And soon, Himmler's carefully built world of files, rituals, and myths will begin to crack. The architect of terror will be forced to confront not just his enemies, but the ruins of his own creation. The silence he hides behind will not last forever. The silence begins to fracture. I take you into the winter of 1942 to 43, the bitter snow-covered fields of Stalingrad where the German army grinds itself into dust. The myth of Nazi invincibility collapses beneath the roar of Soviet guns. For the first time, Hitler's empire trembles. Yet even as the front buckles, Heinrich Himmler refuses to loosen his grip. Instead, he tightens it. Defeat on the battlefield only fuels his obsession with purity, his conviction that extermination is the true path to survival. I see him in those months, pale and bespectacled, poring over maps and files, while outside the Reich staggers under shortages and fear. He speaks of loyalty, of sacrifice, of the eternal mission of the SS. He does not speak of retreat, nor of mercy. To Himmler, the war is no longer just about conquering land. It is about cleansing the world. Every Jewish community destroyed, every village emptied, becomes, in his mind, a bulwark against collapse. The final solution accelerates, not slows, in the face of German defeats. In 1943, trains thunder east with greater frequency. The ghettos that once confined millions are liquidated. I hear the echo of boots in Warsaw as the ghetto rises in desperate rebellion, and I see the SS pour fire and steel upon it, block by block, until nothing remains but rubble and ash. Himmler watches it all from afar, but in his speeches he praises his men for their heroism in crushing resistance. His words drip with the calm pride of a schoolmaster marking high scores, never acknowledging the oceans of blood behind them. What unsettles me most in this period is how he blends fanaticism with practicality. He knows Germany is bleeding manpower on the Eastern Front, and so he expands the use of camp labor. The prisoners who are not gassed are worked to exhaustion in mines, quarries, and armaments factories. Himmler imagines this as efficiency, the SS killing two birds with one stone, destroying undesirables while fueling the war effort. To him, it is proof that his order, unlike the chaotic Wehrmacht, is both pure and practical. And yet, beneath the confidence, I sense the cracks. Reports filter in of Soviet advances, of Allied bombers flattening German cities, of whispers of doubt among the people. Himmler responds not with reflection, but with more control. He expands the SS into new divisions, fielding men in black and camouflage on battlefields from Italy to the Eastern Front. He recruits not just Germans, but foreigners, Dutch, Belgians, even Bosnian Muslims, convincing himself that they too can serve his racial crusade if bound by SS discipline. The irony is stark. The man who preached purity now stretches the definition of his order to fill the gaps left by German losses. But to him, this is not compromise. It is proof that the SS is the future army of Europe, a pan-Germanic knightly order destined to endure beyond Hitler himself. Still, the defeats mount. The Allies land in Sicily. The Red Army pushes westward. German cities burn night after night under Allied bombs. Himmler, however, does not waver. He burrows deeper into ideology, delivering speeches that speak of an unshakable mission. In Posen, in 1943, he addresses senior SS leaders with words that send a chill down the spine even today. Calmly, methodically, he speaks of the extermination of the Jews as a glorious page in history that must never be written down but never be forgotten. He praises his men for their hardness, for having remained decent while carrying out mass murder. The banality of his tone, the bureaucratic calm with which he speaks of genocide, is more horrifying than any scream of hatred. I try to imagine the room in Posen that day. The flicker of lamps, the stiff uniforms, the silence as Himmler's words sink in. No fiery rhetoric, no thunderous applause, just the quiet, matter-of-fact confirmation that extermination is policy, is duty, is destiny. And in that silence, a new level of horror is reached. The mask is fully off. The men in that room know exactly what they are doing. Meanwhile, Himmler's own world becomes more insular. He retreats often to Wewelsburg, his castle of dreams, where he still indulges in medieval fantasies even as the Reich totters. He imagines his SS as an order that will survive centuries, long after the war is won or lost. He surrounds himself with runes, rituals, and genealogies, convincing himself that history bends toward his vision. To outsiders, it looks delusional. But to Himmler, it is the only reality worth clinging to as the ground shifts beneath him. By 1944, Germany is collapsing into crisis. The Allies storm Normandy. The Soviets smash through Ukraine. And inside Germany, resistance stirs. The July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler shakes the regime to its core. Himmler seizes the moment to tighten control once more. His SS hunts down conspirators, hangs them on meat hooks, and films the executions as warnings. The bureaucrat has become the hangman of the Reich, ensuring loyalty through terror even as the walls close in. And yet, in his private moments, he still clings to the ordinary. He continues to write to his mistress, to worry over his health, to dream of the post-war estates where SS families will thrive. It is this dissonance that gnaws at me. Even as he presides over the machinery of death, he nurtures the fantasy of a peaceful, ordered future, a future built on bones. The defeats are no longer distant thunder. They are at the gates. But Himmler believes, even now, that his order can endure, that his dream of racial purity can outlast the Reich itself. He sees the SS as a seed planted in blood and fire, destined to grow even in ruin. But what happens when the seed is trampled, when the master of files and rituals is forced to confront not destiny but defeat? The war is shifting into its final, most desperate stage, and soon Himmler will face choices that reveal not just his power, but his delusion. The bureaucrat of death is about to become the desperate gambler of survival. I take you now into 1945, the final, shuddering collapse of the Reich. Germany is a land of ruins. Cities once filled with triumphant marches now lie in heaps of ash. The Soviets thunder in from the east, the Allies from the west, and the 1,000-year empire is revealed for what it always was, a brittle dream crumbling in less than 12. And in the midst of this disintegration, Heinrich Himmler, architect of terror, high priest of purity, begins to unravel. I see him in those desperate months, pale and exhausted, his once steady hand trembling slightly as he reads reports. The Reich he helped to bind so tightly is unspooling before him. Trains no longer carry prisoners eastward. They carry terrified civilians fleeing west. Camps that once echoed with the boots of SS guards now lie abandoned, prisoners staggering out as skeletons into the daylight. The machinery he built with such precision is collapsing, piece by piece, under the weight of defeat. And yet, Himmler clings to the illusion of control. Even as Hitler retreats into the bunker, raging at betrayal and defeat, Himmler tells himself that he alone can save what remains of Germany. His SS, he insists, is still the nucleus of a future order, a seed that can survive even if the Reich itself is burned away. In his mind, he begins to imagine not just defeat, but negotiation. If he can offer the Allies something, anything, perhaps he can preserve himself, his order, his dream. I hear the whispers of these secret overtures. Through intermediaries in neutral Sweden, Himmler sends feelers to the west. He promises to surrender German forces, to halt the fighting, to turn against the Soviets. He paints himself as the reasonable Nazi, the one who can be trusted, the one who might even help build a new bulwark against Bolshevism. It is delusion, of course. Delusion cloaked in diplomacy. But in his mind, it is a path to survival. What is most haunting is the double life he continues to lead even in these final days. To Hitler, he professes loyalty, visiting the bunker and bowing before the Führer. To the Allies, he whispers of deals, of surrender, of pragmatism. He tells himself he can be both, the faithful knight and the cunning statesman. But masks cannot be worn forever, and soon his duplicity will be exposed. As the Allies advance, Himmler makes one last show of control. In April 1945, he orders prisoners from camps like Bergen-Belsen and Dachau to be marched westward in endless columns, the infamous death marches. Starving, diseased, broken, they stumble along roads littered with corpses, guarded by SS men who no longer believe in victory, but still carry out orders. For Himmler, these marches are not merely cruelty. They are denial. Denial that the camps are lost. Denial that his order is collapsing. Denial that the dream is over. He cannot let go of control, even as the world burns. And then comes the moment of revelation. News of his secret negotiations reaches Hitler. In the bunker, surrounded by concrete walls and impending doom, the Führer hears that his most loyal knight has sought to cut a deal with the enemy. The betrayal is too much. Hitler rages, strips Himmler of all titles, expels him from the party. The man who built the SS, who stood as the embodiment of loyalty, is cast out in disgrace. In that instant, the mask shatters. I imagine Himmler in those days, suddenly without the aura of power, wandering through the collapsing Reich like a ghost. His name is cursed, his authority gone, his dream in ruins. He still clings to fantasies, telling himself that if he can just survive, if he can just explain himself to the Allies, he will be understood. He believes his meticulous files, his obsession with discipline, his image as the loyal administrator, will shield him. He does not grasp that the world sees him for what he is, the architect of mass murder. In May 1945, the war ends, the Reich surrenders, the banners of conquest fall, replaced by white flags of defeat. And Himmler? He vanishes into the chaos, discarding his uniform, donning a disguise, hoping to slip unnoticed into the wreckage of Germany. From the high priest of purity to a fugitive in civilian clothes, such is the final descent of the man who once dreamed of knighthood and destiny. I pause here, in the silence after surrender, and feel the weight of irony. Himmler, who built an empire of files and camps, now carries no papers, no authority, no power. He is a hunted man, clutching only his delusions. He tells himself that the Allies will see his value, that they will treat him as a statesman, not a criminal. But history has already judged him, even before the noose is tied. The ruins of Berlin still smoke. The camps lie open, their horror revealed to the world. And somewhere, Himmler slips through the wreckage, still whispering to himself that he can survive, that his secret life is not over. But the walls are closing in. The net is tightening. And soon, the man behind the glasses will stand exposed, not as a knight, not as a priest, but as a broken fugitive haunted by the abyss he created. The Reich is dead. Its banners lie trampled in the rubble of Berlin, its leaders scattered like ash on the wind. And Heinrich Himmler, the man who once commanded millions, now walks the back roads of northern Germany disguised as a common soldier. I see him hunched in ill-fitting uniform, his spectacles hidden beneath an eye patch, his insignia stripped away. Gone are the medals, the polished boots, the aura of authority. He trudges with a small group of aides, carrying only the weight of his secrets and the unbearable illusion that he still matters. He tells himself, "I am not finished." In his mind, the war may be lost, but the mission of the SS lives on. He convinces himself that the Allies, once they understand his vision, will see his value. He imagines himself negotiating from a position of influence, as if the man who orchestrated the Holocaust could recast himself as a statesman. Delusion has become his final refuge. The countryside around him is broken, filled with starving refugees, columns of surrendering soldiers, and the silence of a nation in shock. Villages smolder, bridges lie shattered, fields are pocked with craters. Himmler blends into this sea of defeat, his once commanding presence dissolved into anonymity. Yet even in disguise, he cannot help himself. To the men with him, he speaks of rebuilding, of order, of purity. He still dreams aloud of a future that no longer exists. On May 21, 1945, near Bremervörde, British soldiers stop his ragged group at a checkpoint. The men present forged papers, claiming to be ordinary soldiers of the civil defense. Himmler, with his awkward eye patch and false name, stands quietly among them. But something about him draws suspicion. His manner is too careful, too rehearsed. The British escort him to a holding camp in Westertimke, a barbed wire enclosure filled with prisoners awaiting interrogation. There, in the dim light of a barracks, the moment comes. Himmler is ordered to reveal his identity. A British officer studies his face, demands he remove the eye patch, asks for his papers again. Finally, the mask slips. He mutters his real name, Heinrich Himmler, and the room shifts. The most feared man in Nazi Germany, second only to Hitler, stands revealed as a gaunt, defeated prisoner. I can almost hear the silence in that moment, the shock that ripples through the guards. They had expected to catch small fry, stragglers, anonymous soldiers. Instead, they hold the architect of the SS in their custody. But Himmler, even now, believes he holds some power. He straightens his posture, adjusts his spectacles, and insists he must be brought to Eisenhower, to the Allied command. He imagines himself at a negotiation table, explaining calmly, rationally, how he can be useful in rebuilding Europe against the Soviets. His voice carries the same tone of bureaucratic assurance he once used to order mass murder. But the world has changed. No one listens. No one sees a statesman. They see a criminal. They see the man behind the gas chambers, the death marches, the Gestapo. His name is a stain that cannot be washed away. For the first time, Himmler faces a reality in which his words hold no sway. His carefully built image, his mask of discipline and destiny, has disintegrated. On May 23rd, he is transferred to British headquarters in Lüneburg for a formal interrogation. Guards escort him into a small room, his hands searched, his body examined. They plan to strip him of every possession before questioning begins. But Himmler has prepared for this moment. Hidden in his mouth, concealed in the cavity of a tooth, is a capsule of cyanide. It is his final weapon, his last assertion of control. I see him seated at the table, flanked by British officers. They demand answers. He asks for recognition, insists on his importance, presses to speak with higher authority. The officers ignore his pleas, intent on stripping him down, searching him thoroughly. And then, in one sudden, decisive motion, Himmler bites down. A sharp crack, a metallic taste, and the poison floods his body. The guards panic. They try to wrench open his jaw, to force the capsule out, but it is too late. His body convulses, his lips froth, his eyes bulge behind the spectacles that had hidden so much for so long. Within minutes, the architect of terror is gone, sprawled lifeless on the floor of a British interrogation room. It is a pathetic end, and yet chilling in its simplicity. No trial, no grand reckoning, no speeches of defiance, just a capsule of cyanide, hidden for years in preparation, and a coward's escape into silence. He denies the world the satisfaction of judgment, denies his victims the testimony that might have exposed his soul. Even in death, he hides. The British, stunned, bury him in secret, his grave unmarked, his body lost to history. No monument, no shrine, no place for followers to gather. The man who dreamed of a 1,000-year order vanishes into the dirt, anonymous, forgotten. And yet, the shadow of what he built lingers. The camps remain, the photographs remain, the survivors remain. I stand here, at the end of his story, and feel the hollowness of his final act. Himmler lived a life of masks, bureaucrat, mystic, knight, loyal servant, visionary. But when the mask cracked, when the files burned and the Reich collapsed, nothing remained but a small man with glasses and a vial of poison. And yet, the question lingers. How could a man so ordinary, timid, bookish, fussy, shape a machinery of death so vast? How could delusions of purity and destiny, when bound to files and structure, consume an entire continent? The answer lies not just in Himmler himself, but in the shadow he leaves behind, a shadow that still haunts history. The secret life of Heinrich Himmler has ended, but its echoes have not. The poison has done its work. Himmler lies buried in a secret grave somewhere beneath German soil, his body swallowed by anonymity. No monument marks the spot, no wreaths are laid. The man who dreamt of building a 1,000-year order has no stone, no epitaph, not even a name carved in earth. And yet, I feel his shadow linger, because Heinrich Himmler's legacy was never meant to be measured in graves. It was meant to live in the order he built, the rituals he wove, the myths he told. Though the man is gone, the machinery he unleashed remains burned into history. I take you now into the silence after his death. Europe lies shattered, scarred by a war that killed tens of millions. The camps stand open, their barbed wire sagging, their ovens cold, their barracks filled with the smell of ash and despair. Survivors stumble out, skeletal and hollow-eyed, their stories etched into their skin. Soldiers with cameras capture what they find: piles of shoes, mountains of hair, children's toys among the ruins. These images become the evidence of Himmler's life's work. He may have swallowed poison, but the truth he tried to hide spills into the world in photographs, testimonies, and memories too terrible to erase. And so I reflect on the duality of this man. On the one hand, he was ordinary, timid, weak-chinned, a bureaucrat with spectacles who loved gardening and herbal remedies. He was the sort of man you might pass on the street without noticing. On the other, he was extraordinary in the worst possible sense. He built an empire of terror that spanned a continent, transforming ideology into procedure, myth into machinery, fantasy into genocide. It was precisely his ordinariness that made him so dangerous, because he was not a raging madman, not a fiery demagogue. He was a clerk who believed his paperwork summoned destiny, and in his hands, the tools of administration became instruments of mass murder. I find myself thinking of the letters he wrote to his wife, filled with petty worries about the garden or his digestion, while in the same breath he commanded the destruction of millions. It is this dissonance that unsettles me most. How could a man sit at a desk, write tenderly of home, and then sign an order that sent thousands to their deaths? Perhaps the answer lies in the way he compartmentalized his world, hiding the abyss beneath the mask of duty. Perhaps it lies in the intoxication of belief, the conviction that he was serving something higher, something sacred. But whatever the answer, the result was the same: death on an unimaginable scale. Himmler's dream was never simply to conquer land. It was to conquer the human soul. He wanted to reshape humanity itself, to breed and purify, to erase and rebuild, to write his mythology onto flesh and blood. In Wewelsburg Castle, he planned ceremonies of knights and runes, believing the SS would endure as a priesthood for centuries. It is chilling to think how close he came to making that dream a reality. Had the war ended differently? His vision was not madness alone. It was methodical, structured, bureaucratic. And that is why it remains so haunting. Now, decades later, I take you into the lessons his life forces us to confront. We often imagine evil as monstrous, visible, unmistakable. But Himmler reminds us that it can wear glasses, carry files, and speak in calm, measured tones. It can present itself as order, as discipline, as duty. It can hide behind words like purity and honor while it builds crematoria. Evil does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. The survivors carried their stories into the world so that the whispers could never be forgotten. They testified in courtrooms, wrote memoirs, spoke to classrooms, bore witness so that the mask of bureaucracy would never again conceal the abyss. And yet, I feel the unease of history repeating its patterns, how myths of purity still seduce, how bureaucracies still justify cruelty, how ordinary men still convince themselves that obedience absolves responsibility. Himmler's life is not only a warning from the past, it is a mirror held up to the present. I end where I began, with the image of a man behind spectacles, his face bland, almost forgettable, and yet, behind that face lay one of the darkest visions the world has ever known. His secret life was not simply hidden rituals and private obsessions. It was the ability to turn dreams into orders, orders into systems, and systems into death. That is what makes him so terrifying. Not that he was a monster apart from humanity, but that he was a man within it. As I step away from this story, I leave you with a haunting thought. If Himmler could cloak horror behind the mask of duty, If he could weave fantasy into policy and turn paperwork into genocide, then the line between ordinary and monstrous is far thinner than we might wish to believe. His grave is unmarked, but his shadow remains, and it whispers a warning. Watch carefully the men who speak softly of order, who file their papers neatly, who promise purity and destiny. For behind the mask, the abyss may wait once more. The secret life of Heinrich Himmler is exposed. But the greater secret is this: history does not bury its lessons as easily as bodies in the ground.